A lot of women don't even know they can file for child support without filing for divorce. I meet so many women saying, "I'm carrying the whole household alone. My husband gives everything to his sisters and his mom." You mentioned that many women don't even know their rights, but how are they supposed to find out? We need a dedicated standalone law because the one we currently have just isn't enough. There were so many proposals and amendments flying around, and it seemed like a lot of them actually made it through. It really looked like a win for common sense and fairness. The reconciliation clause is still in place. Right from the moment a woman files a report, she's pressured by the police. It's entirely possible for any one of us to be called to serve as a juror. Out of about 100 people invited, around 70% just drop out. They don't even show up for the selection. Technically, you're a corporate lawyer. I realized that if I, as a lawyer, can be attacked in a courthouse and no one steps in, then what chance do these women have? Women who can't escape their abusers. Abuse is no longer a taboo subject, and once we recognize a problem, we can start finding a way out. Zhanna Urazbakhova is a lawyer with the Almaty City Bar Association. Her main area of expertise is economic and corruption-related crimes. But she's best known for her work supporting victims of domestic violence. Zhanna represented the victim's family in the widely publicized case of Sultanat Lukinova's murder and many others like it. But her work doesn't stop at the courtroom. For several years now, she's been actively pushing for changes not just to the law, but to how it's enforced. Hello, Zhanna. Hello, Uliana. We're glad to be in Almaty with you. And honestly, you probably don't need much of an introduction. People already know you for a very specific kind of work. Which leads to my first question. Technically, you are a corporate lawyer. It even says so on your Instagram. But you've been very publicly involved in the fight against domestic violence. And this started long before the Sultanat Nukenova case. You've mentioned being part of working groups, traveling abroad to see how women's support centers operate. In short, doing a huge amount of advocacy. What is it about this issue that won't let you go? I've been involved in advocacy for over a decade now. I take on pro bono cases, meaning I don't charge for them, for victims of domestic and sexual violence. And I just haven't been able to walk away from this issue. One of the main reasons is that back in 2017, Kazakhstan decriminalized the offense of international infliction of minor bodily harm. What that really meant in practice was that men were essentially allowed to beat their wives. What followed was a sharp spike in violence across Kazakhstan. Cases of domestic abuse began to grow exponentially. I even experienced it firsthand, right inside a courthouse. The husband of a client I was representing in a divorce case attacked me in the courtroom right in front of a bailiff. And no one did anything. Not the bailiff, not security, not the police. He was so certain he wouldn't face any consequences. That was a turning point for me. I realized that if I, as a lawyer, can't be attacked in a courthouse and no one steps in, then what chances do these women have? Women who can't escape their abusers, who are trapped and essentially enslaved by them. That's when I knew I had to work on legislative initiatives and push for real change. That's how I became involved in advocacy. And we'll definitely talk more about how effective you feel that work has been. But I also want to hear more about your life, especially now, after that landmark case. I imagine quite a lot has changed. It really has. I'd love to share more. I think people might find it interesting. Zhanna, it just so happens that we're meeting almost exactly a year after the president signed the long-awaited law on domestic violence, the one so many people had pinned their hopes on. From your perspective as a lawyer, have things actually changed, or is it still too early to say? It's still too early. The amendments only came into force on June 15th, and there hasn't been enough time yet to see how they're being applied. We really need at least a year's worth of data. How many cases were reported, how many made it to the court, and let's not forget the reconciliation clause is still in place, so a woman can file a report but then later decide to reconcile and withdraw it. So we can't ignore that either. Realistically, I'll be able to give a clearer answer in about a year, maybe a year and a half. Okay, then let me put it this way. The law that was passed a year ago in the form it's in now, would you say it's enough? Absolutely no. What we really need is a dedicated standalone law. Right now we're working with an outdated law from 2009 on the prevention of domestic violence, and frankly, it no longer reflects today's realities. A new law was proposed back in 2021, but it never made it through, mostly due to group of activities. You probably remember the outcry. There were scare tactics. People were told their kids would be taken away, and the public was manipulated into opposing the legislation. That pushback derailed everything, and the bill was withdrawn from the Majlis. So unfortunately, we're left with an old, largely ineffective law. The changes made by the president last year were just amendments to existing legislation, mainly the administrative and criminal codes. For example, in 2017, two important articles were removed from the criminal code, one on battery and another on minor bodily harm. In 2024, those articles were reinstated. So essentially, what used to be criminal offenses before 2017 became criminal offenses again in 2024. So basically, we ended up right back where we started, without really bringing anything new to the table. Is that how it is? Zhanna, when this law was being discussed, there were so many proposals and amendments flying around, and it seemed like a lot of them actually made it through. It really looked like a win for common sense and fairness. There have been some improvements. For example, if a child is in danger, authorities can now remove them from the home and place them in a specialized center. Courts can also order psychological treatment for the abuser, something activists had been pushing for over many years. Because let's be honest, when someone is violent, you have to understand why. What's driving that aggression? Now, there's a mechanism to refer the abuser for mandatory therapy. They can also be removed from the home. Protective orders have more teeth now. And if the abuser violates one, say threatens or assaults the victim, the consequences are much stricter. For example, a woman can request a protection order, and for 30 days, the abuser is legally barred from contacting her or coming near her. Is that enough? Of course not. But before, if someone violated a protective order, the penalty was just a fine, 5 monthly calculation units. Now, it's an immediate arrest. So yes, there have been steps in the right direction, but like I said, what we truly need is a specialized standalone law. And here's another issue. The 2024 amendments don't only apply to domestic abuse. Let's say two guys get into a fight on the street, shake hands afterward, and go their separate ways, but one of them files a complaint. That case still falls under the same law, so really we need a dedicated article in the criminal code. One that regulates that specific kind of relationship. One that regulates family and domestic relationships specifically. You know, Zhanna, I've been following the cases you post, and honestly, I'm amazed by how you manage to help so many women. But it also makes me think, not every woman in Kazakhstan will be lucky enough to have someone like Zhanna Urazbakhova fighting for her. There just aren't enough lawyers to go around. It's just not possible. So how should the system work to actually protect women? I mean, sure, we've got the law, but then what? What we really need is a reform of the law enforcement system, because what happens far too often is that right from the moment a woman files a report, she's pressured by the police. Why are you doing this? They say. Withdraw the complaint. He's the father of your children. I've personally witnessed conversations like that. And when I confronted one of the officers about it, he said, what's the point? She's going to withdraw it anyway. Better if she doesn't file it at all. It's just extra hustle for him. But for that woman, it could literally be a matter of life and death, because when the police don't take it seriously, it sends a message to the abuser that he can get away with it. And that sense of impunity only fuels more violence. He thinks, I'll hit her, she'll withdraw the complaint. I hit her again, we'll reconcile in court. Worst case, I get 5 days in jail and that's it. But if the system, if the state steps in and says, no, you're not going near her again, not for 30 days, for a year, you're banned from approaching her, your kids, even your own home until you go through psychological counseling and deal with your aggression, then the conversation changes. That's when abuser starts to understand there are real consequences to his actions. And what about beyond tougher penalties? Is there any other way to tackle this?
Конечно, профилактика. Выявление на ранней стадии, работа с жертвами, чтобы она не возвращалась к абьюзеру, либо какая-то... Вообще здесь нужно, чтобы...
Prevention, of course. Early intervention, helping victims avoid going back to their abusers.
Почему именно женщины?
And we really need the state to get involved in family, especially in cases where woman doesn't have a job and nowhere to go.
И абьюзеры это понимают.
That's when domestic violence is most likely to happen, and abusers know it.
У нее нет работы.
They know she's stuck.
Каким-то
So it's about giving women access to training, even just vocational skills.
на уровне
Going into universities, talking to students, helping them understand how crucial education is.
сейчас
Because believe it or not, there are still professors telling female students, you just need to know how to cook and wash socks.
стирать носки и готовить еду.
At universities.
В вузах были такие факты.
Yes, there have been such cases in universities. Why bother learning a profession? You're just going to get married anyway. That kind of thinking needs to change. We need to start with the younger generation. This has to be a large-scale effort aimed at youth.
Работа такая большая, масштабная работа.
And who do you think should be doing this work?
Государство. Через сферу образования.
The state, absolutely, through the education system.
Практически невозможно.
Without the state, there's no way we can shift public thinking. We need to work with whole generations. Luckily, kids today are a lot more aware. They know terms like abuser, wife-beater, man-child. They know what those things mean. But our generation grew up being told, just get married, or if he hits you, it means he loves you.
Если бьют, то значит
All that talk about saving the family no matter what, that doesn't fly anymore.
сейчас это уже не действует. Люди
Now we're the ones passing on different values to our kids.
потому что
Because times are changing. People are changing. Abuse is no longer a taboo subject. Back then, nobody would have known that Masha or Aygul was getting beaten at home. You just didn't talk about it.
вообще. А сейчас та же Маша
But now, the same Masha or Aygul might post about it online with a hashtag.
МИТУ
They'll say, I am an abuse victim.
абьюзинга. То есть
The fact that we're finally acknowledging it, that's already a step in the right direction.
А если мы
And once we recognize a problem, we can start finding a way out.
уже хорошо. A lot of women don't even know they can file for child support without filing for divorce. You can be legally married and still request alimony. And when might that be necessary? Ну, например, если сейчас основная проблема,
Well, for example, one major issue these days is gambling addiction. Let's say the husband's gambling away all the money. The wife can file for child support, and his employer will be required to send a portion of his salary straight to her. Maybe she doesn't want to leave him, maybe she still loves him, or she's trying to help him. But in the meantime, he's not contributing anything toward the kid.
носит на содержание
In other cases, the husband may be dealing with addiction, or maybe he's spending everything on a mistress, or giving it all to his parents, and not helping his own family.
своих родителей и вообще.
It's a huge problem. I get so many women saying, I'm carrying the whole household alone.
Женщина обращается.
My husband gives everything to his sisters and his mom. we get nothing. You mentioned that many women don't even know their rights, but how are they supposed to find out? That's exactly why we need to raise public awareness about legal rights, and that's something I keep talking about. It has to start in school. Legal education shouldn't be treated like an optional extra. It should be a core subject. Kids should learn how to navigate the legal system, how to look up the laws that apply to them. As lawyers, we're not trained to memorize every article in the criminal or administrative codes. We're trained to know where to find what we need. If we start teaching that early, and if we also use tools like social media and educational TV programs where lawyers break things down for the public, legal literacy will improve across the board. That's what I try to do with my blog. I share real-world legal cases, walk people through them, and then open up a question box where anyone can ask for clarification. And the response I get is overwhelming. So many people write, "I had no idea. Thank you for explaining." Take gambling addiction, for example. When I posted about it, people were shocked to learn that they could voluntarily block themselves from placing bets. According to the ICD-10, gambling addiction is classified as a mental health disorder. People literally lose control. Sadly, in a lot of cases, it ends in one or two ways, either prison or suicide, often after a crime committed in desperation. In search of money, right? Exactly, but there's a way to interrupt that cycle. If someone has even a brief moment of clarity and realizes they need help, they can go to any gambling operator, submit a request with their ID, and that operator is legally required to block them for a full year. And not just that operator, but across the entire system. Yes, across the board. Every legal gambling outlet in Kazakhstan, casinos, betting shops, everything, is then prohibited from taking bets from that person. If any operator ignores the request and lets them place a bet, the person has the right to sue and recover their losses. Zhanna, I want to circle back to the Bishimbayev's case, not just because of what happened, but because the trial was broadcasted live. For the first time, people got to see what a real court process actually looks like. Not the versions you see from TV shows. The formalities, the procedures, all of it. Do you think that kind of transparency helped improve legal awareness?
Я думаю, безусловно, это можно понять даже потому, какую терминологию сейчас используют в каких-то спорах. Заявите ходатайство, обратитесь к суду, мы отклоняем.
I think it absolutely did. You can see it in how people talk now, even in everyday arguments. They're using legal terms, file a motion, appeal to the court, your motion is denied. There are tons of funny reels about it. But at the core of it, people got to see what actually happens in court, how a judge might deny a motion, how the defense operates, what the prosecutor does. Before this, most people's understanding of trials came from legal dramas or American movies about jury trials. Now they've seen the real thing, how we present a case to a jury, how we try to improve guilt or innocence. I think people now have a much better understanding of how criminal trials with juries actually work.
Но вот на самом деле, с учетом того, как расширяется сейчас правоприменительная практика суда присяжных, по сути, практически каждый из нас может получить...
And now that jury trials are becoming more common, it's entirely possible for any of us to be called to serve as a juror.
И уж точно...
You've worked on a number of jury trials, and I'm sure Bishimbayev's case won't be your last.
Вы видите готовность?
Do you think Kazakh society is ready to embrace the jury system on a larger scale?
Быстро и широко развивался.
К сожалению, нет, потому что затащить в суд в качестве присяжного человека это практически невозможно.
Honestly, not yet.
Человеку приходит.
Getting people to actually serve as jurors is incredibly difficult. When someone receives a summons for jury selection, around 70% just don't show up.
Они не приходят просто на отбор.
Even though they're warned they could face administrative penalties for skipping it, they still don't come.
Но люди не хотят.
People don't want to risk losing their jobs.
Например, условно.
The idea of spending 3 or 4 months in a courtroom listening to legal arguments, it just doesn't appeal to most.
Им это не интересно.
So the reality is, most people don't want to fulfill that civic duty.
Долг и приходить в суд.
And to be fair, many would say it's a serious commitment. You're basically stepping out of your life for 3 to 4 months. You have to go to court like it's your job. You have to pay attention.
Это надо...
But you do get paid for it.
Да, это надо вникать, это надо всем сердцем понимать.
Still, it's something you have to commit to with your whole heart.
Заседатели рассматриваются дела.
And we shouldn't forget, jury trials usually deal with very serious crimes.
Какая мотивация должна быть?
These are major cases. So in a society that's more mature and legally aware, what kind of motivation should a person have to actually take on the role of a juror?
И стать присяжным.
For me as a lawyer, it's first and foremost a civic duty. Being a juror means taking part in the administration of justice. You're stepping into the role of the court.
Полномочия суда. Это очень важная миссия. От вас зависит дальнейшая судьба этого человека и его будущее.
It's a serious responsibility. You're helping decide someone's fate, their future.
Человека виновным, то будущее.
If you're leaning toward a guilty verdict, it's also about justice for the victims.
Какой приговор
The sentence will be based on your decision.
подсудимого.
And the second motivation, which is also important, is money. Jurors are paid half a judge's salary.
Половину заработной платы судьи.
А если говорить о повышении справедливости судебных решений?
What about improving the fairness of court decisions? If more people served as jurors and this practice expanded, do you think our system could become fairer?
Система становится более справедливой,
After all, juries tend to acquit more often than panels of judges.
чем коллегии судов.
Absolutely, no question about it.
К сожалению, зачастую.
But not everyone knows that. Unfortunately, a lot of people think their vote doesn't matter, like, why bother? The decision's already made, we'll just be pressured anyway.
Даже правоохранительные
And then there's fear.
обыски.
For example, even when law enforcement conducts searches and needs witnesses present, hardly anyone wants to step up.
Это преступление.
It's the same with being a witness to a crime. People see what happened, but just run away. Don't give their contact info. Avoid any involvement with the authorities.
Системой. Потому что
They're scared of getting tangled up in trouble or of being pressured.
правоохранители сами
They figure the police can handle it without them.
доказано какой-то
That fear is very common.
Вы вошли в число 25 влиятельных женщин по версии Forbes.
You were named one of Forbes' 25 most influential women. How do you feel about that? Do you really feel like you have that kind of influence?
Что вы на что-то влияете прям.
На самом деле, я сама этого не чувствую, но мои клиенты
Honestly, I don't really feel it myself.
супер круто.
But my clients seem to think it's a big deal, like now we're going to win every case because I made that list. For me, influence comes down to how well I do my job.
Как качественно я делаю свою работу.
That's what counts. Handling every case with integrity and dedication, supporting my clients and their families all the way through.
Вожу своих клиентов, сопровождаю их и их семью.
А я вот скорее хотела спросить о том, почему.
I was actually going to ask, why do you think you made the list?
На что
What kind of impact do you want to have?
влиять даже так?
Я бы хотела влиять, наверное, в первую очередь на принятие тех
I want to influence the laws that actually work. Laws that protect women, vulnerable groups, children, teens, basically laws that safeguard our future.
подростков и во благо всего нашего будущего.
А вот почему именно их? Уточню свой вопрос, потому что вы работаете в том числе, например, и по коррупционным делам.
Why focus on those groups? I ask because you also deal with corruption cases and corporate disputes where the legal system also has plenty of issues.
Вот вы
So why put your energy into these particular causes?
положение дела этих людей.
Я объясню, почему. Потому что я, наверное, уточню тут, что самое главное, большинство моих клиентов – это мужчины.
Let me explain why.
Я занимаюсь преступлением.
I should probably clarify upfront that most of my clients are men, simply because I work in the field of economic crime, so naturally the majority of them are entrepreneurs.
Очень много
That said, I'm well aware that there are many different organizations out there. The Council for the Protection of Entrepreneurs' Rights, ATAMECAN, and quite a few lawyers and legal experts focused on improving criminal and procedural law.
законодательства. Есть множество рабочих
There are even several working groups involved in that effort.
семейно-бытовых отношений.
But when it it comes to problems in the area of domestic and family relationships, specifically protecting women, no one really seems willing to step up. Yes, there are plenty of NGOs doing important work in this space, but unfortunately, they're often not given the opportunity to grow or have a real say when it comes to shaping legislation. That's exactly why I want to be someone who helps women and children feel safe by pushing for laws that truly protect their rights.
Которые будут защищать их права.